do that. All right, peace and love. It is sustaining us through all kinds of weather as we've been discussing. And it's cold here in Michigan. It's cold in Connecticut, but Dee is oblivious to it. So no, no worries there. But I'm glad you guys could be here to join me. Maybe Kathleen will still be here a little bit later. I haven't heard anything to the contrary, but I'm excited tonight. I guess that's my usual MO, is being excited, because tonight we are in the Unity and A Course in Miracles book. And I'd like to pick up where we left off last time, which was on page 63. But, you know, I think it'd be better if we kind of get a running start and start on page 62, where we start talking about a comparison of what Unity and ACIM have to say about the ego. So if it's all right with you, we'll get our readers going and start on page 62 and see if we can get some value out of these discussions. I have Sherilyn as reader 1, and then Dee is 2, Ron 3, Joan 4, and I'll be reader 5. Is that good enough to get started there?
Great.
Yes.
All right, Miss White, please.
Yes, sir. The ego. In Unity and A Course in Miracles, both theologies present an essential message, the reason for the existence of these teachings. Both recognize humankind has strayed from home. Our life is lived from a state that believes we are separate from God. The only place this seems to exist is within our beliefs, and these beliefs are maintained by the ego thought system. It is our relinquishment of this belief of separation that enables us to know we are created in the image and likeness of God, derived from Genesis 1:26.
Mm-hmm.
The ego thought, you want me to continue?
Please, that's fine.
Okay. The ego thought system is pervasive. In the absence of any guidance or correction, our perceptions, our way of seeing the world, our way of seeing ourselves, and our way of dealing with anyone else occur through the ego-based thought system. Herein lies the course of fear, pain, the source of fear, pain, sickness, loneliness, doubt, anger, and even our belief in death.
Okay.
The difference.
Read until you want to stop.
Oh,
it's fine.
Okay. The difference between the two teachings lies in matters of semantics. Their commonality speaks to the resolution. All perceptions that flow from the ego-based thought system are forgiven or released and replaced with perceptions that are based on a higher consciousness. Both teachings describe this process in a manner that is moving towards the same end result. What differs is the description of the realm of the ego and what it conveys.
Let me just stop there. One of the things I wanted to clarify, I've heard this said before in this book. The difference between the two teachings lies in matters of semantics. Do you see where I'm reading?
Yes.
What does that word mean, semantics?
Just a different way of describing it.
Yeah.
Which makes me realize, that pleases me, because it's saying the same thing as what they're saying.
All right.
Yeah.
So once again, we see that both teachings teach the same thing.
Mhm.
but maybe the wording, the words they've chosen to use are a bit different. And
Truth is truth.
yeah,
And
and
if they
so,
weren't saying the same thing, something would be wrong.
right, right. And that's why I say that's kind of a recurring phrase. It's more a matter of semantics, isn't it?
Yes.
Any comments or questions other than that from you? Then
Seems
let's,
very clear.
okay. Dee, you're the next reader.
A Course in Miracles.
Do you
The
see
course.
Oh,
where
yeah.
we are, where it says within a course?
Oh, I missed a paragraph.
Yeah.
Sorry. Within A Course in Miracles, the ego is identified as an error thought system. It is always wrong, as it furthers the belief in separation. It is an illusion. A Course in Miracles does speak of moving our consciousness to true perception, a state where every ego-based thought is forgiven immediately and replaced with perception derived from a consciousness of love. Unity recognizes the pervasive presence of the ego thought system and speaks for its transition from a sense-based ego to a spiritual ego, to the attainment of the Christ mind Jesus realized. Whether labeled as true perception or the spiritual ego, both teachings are leading towards relinquishment of the separation-based thought system that humankind has come to rely on in our day-to-day living.
You know, did either of you pick up the rather nuanced difference that was discussed in this paragraph, the one that Dee read?
Mhm.
Yeah, the Course wouldn't use the word spiritual ego.
Okay.
They
Uh,
really don't.
yeah, the course is ego is error. Do you see that word?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it
Mhm.
doesn't accept it as anything but error. But here it's, and then it says, unity recognizes the pervasive presence as though it is something real enough to be dealt with, maybe, or to be considered. And so instead of discounting it, we try and change its nature.
That's what the Course is doing. It's not discounting it. It admits that it admits that it's constantly present. We have a choice between which voice we're listening to, always.
Okay. All right.
I don't really see a big difference except in the verbiage.
Okay. I
Mhm.
said it was nuanced, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's more of moving from a sense-based ego to a spiritual ego. And the Course sees the ego as error to be let go of
Mhm.
entirely. But
And unity. Yeah.
the end result will be the same. Now, we're going to run into a lot of semantics as we complete this section. So I thought I put together a little chart. Let me pull that up and maybe talk about that as a way of helping to clarify some of the discussion that's coming up. Um, I just gave it a little title, and I call it the ego illusion. Okay.
Mhm.
You remember last time we talked about the separated mind could not be completely separate.
Mhm.
Mhm.
The separated mind was within itself inherently another separation. It's like it couldn't help but have an A part in it and a B part in it. It couldn't just separate and like divine mind was all A and the separated mind was all B. It couldn't be A, B. Maybe I should have said A, B, and C, because inherently the separated or split mind, the ego mind is a split mind. We could refer to this separated mind as an inherently split mind. It has two parts in it. And you'll hear some of these terms as we read through this material. Within the split, there's a part called the ego. A Course in Miracles will call this part an error. Wrong-mindedness is another term you'll hear. One of the terms I left out, but I'm thinking of now, is the word perception or misperception.
Mm-hmm.
Unity on the part A section of this separated mind would call this the personal ego, or the sense-based ego, or the race-based ego. Race-based here referring to our memories, the memories that we have culturally and otherwise we have been taught. So this sense of ego that we call the personal ego responds to what it senses, what it sees, what it hears, what it feels, what it touches, and to what it has been taught in terms of identity, nationality, color, creed, cultural influences. That is the ego part of the separated mind. But it also contains the truth. Remember, God provided the solution when a strident voice arose as the ego's voice, and God did not blot it out. He did not question it. He gave the answer. So the split occurred, but God put part B into every split. Every split couldn't just be a split with one thing. It of necessity carried the answer or the truth. How am I doing so far? Let's let Kathleen in. Who's confused?
So what you're describing is the same for unity and the Course?
What I'm trying to show you kind of pictorially or graphically here are some of the terms that you're going to hear as we continue reading.
Okay.
But I'm trying to show you kind of what larger categories they fall in.
Great.
So when you hear unity talk about the personal, hi Kathleen.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
We are in the Unity and the Course in Miracles book, and we started on 62 about the ego, and we kind of read the summary of it on 62 and the beginning of 63. And I put together a little chart to help us to visualize some of the terms that they're going to be using. Remember, it's basically semantics, right?
Right.
Okay, what A Course in Miracles calls this, Unity may call something else, but what really matters is on which of these columns these terms fall.
And
So
what did you say race means here? Race.
interestingly enough, race-based ego here is to be thought of as cultural indoctrinations. Okay, the
Okay.
place where you're born, what your parents taught you, what their customs are. I was surprised it wasn't about races like Caucasian, Black, or that, but that's what they call it, race-based ego. They all fall under this separated split mind under the ego or false instead of be the truth.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
in unity, they consider part of salvation is moving from the personal ego to what they would call the spiritual ego. And what A Course in Miracles would say, moving from error to following the Holy Spirit and employing right-mindedness instead of wrong-mindedness. So that's just some of the terminology that we'll be coming across. One of the things I didn't mention that you'll see mentioned is up here, an ignorant child of innocence. The separated mind is simply an ignorant child of innocence. Why? Because none of it's true. Do you notice that this divine mind has no other language associated with it? It has no changes, no perceived things or differences in it at all. The ignorant child of innocence is floating around in God's creation, thoroughly confused because he has separated or split his own mind. It's sad, not because it's bad. It's sad because it's so meaningless. Because nothing happened except in belief. Okay. So we're going to come across those terms, but I thought maybe showing you this chart at this point would be helpful. Does that make sense, or have I just made it worse?
Makes sense. Thank you.
All right, good deal. Kathleen, you with us? And Ron
Yep.
and Joan
Yep.
and Sherilyn?
Okay.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
good deal. So now let's get back to our reading. And I think we're up to Ron to begin with what A Course in Miracles says about the ego.
Yes. The glossary index from A Course in Miracles, keyed to the second edition, written by Kenneth Wapnick, PhD, begins with an introduction to the theory behind A Course in Miracles. A Course in Miracles, therefore, is written on two levels, reflecting two basic divisions. The first level presents the difference between the one mind and the separated mind, while the second contrasts wrong and right-mindedness within the separated mind. On this first level, for example, the world and body are illusions made by the ego and thus symbolizes separation. The second level relates to this world where we believe we are. Here, the world and the body are neutral and serve one of two purposes. To the wrong-minded ego, they are instruments to reinforce separation. To the right-minded, they are the Holy Spirit's teaching devices through which we learn his lessons of forgiveness.
So maybe it would be helpful to make sure we understand that A Course in Miracles is written on two levels. Can somebody reflect back what he's saying about these two levels? What's the first level?
The difference between oneness and separation.
Okay. Between oneness and more than one.
True. Yeah.
What's the, here, let me say it to you and see if it makes sense. A Course talks about level one, oneness, and level two, which at the macro level is the split, right? But the Course also discusses a detail of the split or level two. Level two is not just a unified level two, like the chart. Of necessity, it is a split level two, where there is the ego and the Holy Spirit's view of what life is. So those are the two teaching levels. It goes the macro, and then on a more practical level for us, it talks about the two parts of level two, the choices now that have to be made. And that's what we need salvation from. How are we doing? All right, I'm looking at faces so far, Cheryl and White. I need a A-OK or let's talk about it.
Okay. I just have to think about it more and sort it out.
Okay. Kathleen, Joan, Ron,
It makes sense.
okay. We're doing our checklist here. Joni wants to think about it a little bit. Does this look like
I get it.
Yeah. Does this look like Kenneth Wapnick's chart? And
Yes.
level two, there is a decision maker, because in level two, there's you, and then the Holy Spirit and the ego.
The different types of perception. The
Yes.
two. Yeah.
Yes. And the reason there must be two types is because even in our ignorance, our Creator was not going to abandon us. So every time you split, it was a double split, because he put the truth in you as well as what you wanted to do with your separate heaven idea.
Because we can't wipe out truth. It's
Precisely.
eternal.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do to change truth. So it was going to be there for when, I guess, the kids gave up the madness and wanted to come home. It would
Well, it
have
couldn't
no
not
choice.
be there, right? It couldn't not be there, because you can't disappear truth. I mean, when we're having a nighttime dream, the truth
Try
is
telling
still.
that to your ego. I mean,
But
Hey,
I'm just saying, I'm not even, I don't even get the point that, like, God made sure, like God placed, it's our memory of God. It can't be wiped out.
I didn't say it could be wiped out. It could be covered over by your desire.
And it is covered over. Yeah.
And now you're seeing level 2.
Yeah.
But level 2 has a conscience problem, doesn't it?
Has an authority problem too.
Okay. All right. So we'll see that statement coming up where A Course in Miracles says something like, here, page 64, about 3 paragraphs from the bottom.
Of the course or this book?
No, on this book, on
Okay.
this book, page 64, consciousness is correctly identified as the domain of the ego. The ego is a wrong-minded attempt to perceive yourself as you wish to be rather than as you are. Okay, so that was, I think Ron's on the phone. He'll get a pass, and Sherilyn's pass because she's thinking about it. So we shall continue, right? Did
Sure.
Ron read before? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
All right. So we are on
Yeah, Ron just read.
64, right?
Uh-huh.
And we're up to Joning. Do you see where we are throughout A Course in Miracles, Joe?
Yes, okay. Throughout A Course in Miracles, we find references to our mind being split. At the highest level, this split represents the distinction between the absolute mind, where we are one with God, no separation, no duality, and our separated mind, the individuated mind, the ego mind, believing we are apart from God. The separated mind is an illusion. It is a dream. Our belief in this separation is found in our lives daily. The world we perceive is perpetuated through this thought system. The ego is nothing more than a part of your belief about yourself. The ego is the part of the mind that believes your existence is defined by separation. The ego is idolatry, the sign of a limited and separated self, born in a body, doomed to suffer and to end its life in death. Consciousness is correctly identified as the domain of the ego. The ego is a wrong-minded attempt to perceive yourself as you wish to be rather than as you are. The ego is not you.
And just to go back for clarity, what about the one that says the ego is idolatry? What does he mean, idolatry?
We have it has false idols.
You're worshiping the wrong thing.
You idolize yourself.
Mm,
You're
true.
worshiping a false image, right? Okay, just to be clear. Any other comments? All right. We're up to Kathleen. You want to read next, dear? Then
Sure.
I'll go after you.
The glossary index for A Course in Miracles provides a definition of the ego useful in this discussion. We'll address this in 2 components. The first, the definition of the ego. The ego, the belief in the reality of separated or false self, made as substitute for the self which God created. the thought of separation that gives rise to sin, guilt, fear, and a thought system based on attack to protect itself. The part of the mind that believes it is separated from the mind of Christ. Note, not to be equated with the ego of psychoanalysis, but can be roughly equated with the entire psyche of which the psychoanalytic ego is a part.
Okay, so I'm not close enough to Freud and all of that, but I did want to ask you guys, why does separation give rise to sin, guilt, and fear, and a thought system based on attack?
Because there's the belief in separation is a me and other.
So what does that got to do with sin, guilt, fear, attack?
It means we're different from each other, and that tends to bring out the worst in us because we want to be the best, and we have competition if we're different than other people.
So there's a competition factor. If we're different from each other, doesn't that raise some level of suspicion?
It also raises
You may not.
comparisons, right? Which would be comparisons.
Well, yeah, but beyond comparisons, isn't that also cause a level of, in other words, I can't trust you because you're different.
Mhm, mhm.
I can't completely trust you as if we're the same because there are some unknowns in you that I may have to watch out for. And so if I have to watch out for them, something in me says some preparation may be needed to protect myself. What about guilt? Why does separation give rise to guilt and fear?
Well, I think because we've separated, we're trying to justify our separation. And as we try to justify our separation, we bring fear. Fear comes up, guilt comes up because it's not true. So therefore, it just potentiates where we're at. Because we're separated, we're in that place of push and pull.
Isn't the real separation that we think we've separated from God, and now we fear we're going to be punished from God, and
Yeah,
then
that's yeah.
What is it that's making you feel guilty and maybe you might be punished? What is it that's causing that?
that we killed God off in
I
our
think it's
minds?
the little quiet little voice
Well, yeah,
that
I
you
was just
constantly try and ignore. Go ahead, dear.
gonna. I'm sorry. Was D? Go ahead, D.
I'm done.
I was just gonna say it's that justification. It's the truth that lives within us that the ego is fighting
Can't
against.
get rid of.
Yeah,
It's that little nagging thing that
Yeah.
says, this is a mistake.
yeah,
You're missing the mark.
yeah.
That gives rise to, really? You think I'm making a mistake? I'm guilty? So I just wanted to kind of focus on just why separation brings about these emotions, these feelings. The other thing that's very straightforward is that separation breeds loneliness. Like, I'm in this all to myself. I have to take care of everything. I have to be completely responsible for myself. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of anxiety when you consider all of the other factors. So there's a lot of, I guess, unnecessary self-punishment that inherently comes with the ego thought system. Any other comments from you guys?
So the Holy Spirit is not involved with the separation, so we can't depend on the Holy Spirit if we're truly separated. We have to do everything by ourselves.
And that is not going to be what the voice preaches, is it?
No.
Okay. The voice for truth. It's still in there, man. Oh, I can't get rid of it. Is there more? Or I'll read next. Aren't we on next at the level of this dream? Is that where we are?
Yeah.
Next, at the level of this dream or illusion, the world as we believe it to be, there seems to be another split of the separated mind into what is termed wrong-mindedness and right-mindedness. Wrong-mindedness is when we see and live life only from the ego thought system. We can seem to be lost in it. Yet, however firmly we believe in wrong-mindedness, there is a part of the split mind, right-mindedness, that knows there is something different. There must be a better way. That's that other consciousness that is inevitably part of every split mind. It knows all we see in the wrong-minded state cannot be real or the truth. Right-mindedness is a state of the mind which questions all decisions and judgments made through the ego. It is right-mindedness which looks to a higher resolution, looks for a loving answer to all matters, rather than to perpetuate fear. Continuing from the above glossary index quote, and why don't I turn it back over to Sherilyn for those, okay?
This split mind has two parts, wrong and right-mindedness, ego. Wrong and right-mindedness, ego, is almost always used to denote wrong-mindedness, but can include right-mindedness, the part of the ego that can learn. Wrong-mindedness, the part of our separated and split minds that contains the ego, the voice of sin, guilt, fear, and attack. Right-mindedness, the part of our separated minds that contains the Holy Spirit, the voice of forgiveness and reason.
So let me, did you trip over this like I did? The first paragraph, it said, the split mind has two parts, wrong and right-mindedness.
Yeah.
Ego is almost always used to denote wrong-mindedness, but can include right-mindedness, the part of the ego that can learn.
That it wasn't, it's not my understanding. So it's yeah. I thought the ego was totally unwilling to learn something new.
Interesting statement then, isn't it?
Is that what the course is saying?
Well, I guess we're into semantics again. Let me
Yeah.
Okay.
do this analogy. I forget which guru used it. Um, you know, trying to tame your ego is like, you know, the people that sit on top of an elephant and they're nowhere, it's not a contentious encounter because the elephant would win every time. And yet, an elephant can be trained. You can make an elephant go left when you want it to go left and go right when you want it to go right. You can teach it to sit. But it's not, the training isn't so much a contentious my will versus your will sort of thing. How do you accomplish that? How do you train an elephant? Or how do you train a wild horse?
Repetition of certain information.
There are certain techniques that can be
Mhm.
used
Slowly and with
manage.
patience.
Yes.
I mean, it's on a lot of levels like that. Perhaps it's intellectual strategies and things like that. I'm not sure that's a direct analogy either, but I just wondered if that hit you kind of funny the way it did me when it said that the ego can, the part of the ego that can learn.
But it's
So,
not coming from the ego.
because there is no pure ego in you.
No.
Right.
That is the blessing of your ego, the way it's configured, because it has right-mindedness and wrong-mindedness, and right-mindedness has the strength to correct wrong-mindedness. So maybe
Right.
that's how they're getting into it. At any rate, I don't know.
Yeah, it's the Albert Einstein saying that you can't
At the same level, you can't solve a problem on the
Right.
same level at which it was created.
right. So it's not coming from the ego.
Okay. And yet it can manage the ego.
Right.
I can deliberately train my ego by having it to bend to my will and not its will. I'm inherently stronger because I have the two. I have the choices in me.
But that choice is not an ego choice, right?
That's
When
what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
influence of your right-mindedness
Right.
to teach your wrong-mindedness and have it obey.
Right.
It can be managed. It's like, remember how you could have smacked somebody like you used to do in your younger days, but you stopped yourself and you handled it differently?
In my
Nobody
young
used to smack anybody, but that's a extreme example. But
Mhm.
have you
but
noticed
I think that's an example, but it's not the way it works with the Holy Spirit, because I think that example is many times out of fear that you won't do it.
well, here, let me say it this way. Have you all experienced a time where you didn't react the way that you used to. You used a bit more control,
Mhm.
and hopefully the situation turned out better for you overall. When you could have gotten angry, but you deliberately didn't, you
Right.
overrode the ego side of your ego. Because
Right.
they're both in your ego side, the right-minded ego and the wrong-minded. Now I'm starting to see why Unity can call it the sense-based or whatever, the personal ego versus the spiritual ego. And the spiritual ego is inherently stronger. And we won't get off into that. But how are we doing? Yeah.
How about the decision maker that Watnick speaks about?
All right.
That's the one that chooses, isn't it?
Here, let me pull this up one more time,
Yeah.
my dear. Do you see where it says separated or split mind?
Yes.
That's you, Joan, the decision maker. What
That's
you're
me.
deciding is, do I want to go with A or B?
Okay.
It's a false choice because the whole thing in your confusion is because your interest in separate heavens has made you an ignorant child of innocence. You didn't do anything bad. You didn't do anything. That's what's so meaningless about it, is that this is true and you cannot separate from one mind. So when you attempted, you made yourself a decision maker. Now you have to choose, don't you? That's a lot of work, right?
Right.
This is a decision maker. And what are their decisions? They can choose A or B. But this is your ego, and within it is the ego thought system that you wanted and the truth that you couldn't get away from, even if you thought you did.
Mhm.
You just confused yourself. At home, in God, dreaming that you have to choose. How am I doing here now?
Okay. That helps.
All right, good. I thought you was going to have a headache. Kathleen?
I'm fine.
All right, good. Okay, anybody else? Cheryl and I got to get her on the screen here again.
I'm right there.
All right, my friend. There we
I'm
go.
hiding.
So we are on the bottom of 65, where it says, from the text of ACIM we learn. Are we up to D? Please. Do you see it?
Okay.
Mhm.
From
Yeah.
from the text of A Course in Miracles, we learn the term right-mindedness is properly used as the correction for wrong-mindedness and applies the state of mind that induces accurate perception. It is miracle-minded in view of how you perceive yourself. The following statement from the workbook for students describes the distinction of the mind as used by spirit and the split mind derived from our wrong-minded thinking. Spirit makes use of mind as means to find its self-expression and the mind which serves the spirit is at peace and filled with joy. Its power comes from spirit, and it is fulfilling happily its function here. Yet, mind can also see itself divorced from spirit and perceive itself within a body it confuses with itself. Without its function, then, it has no peace, and happiness is alien to its thoughts.
So what is its function? It says spirit makes use of mind as a need. No, it says with spirit, it is fulfilling happily its function. What is its function?
Of capital true self expression.
Yeah, almost gave you the answer before, right? Okay. That is how right-mindedness would make use of this thing that you made. It is going to still take that, and its whole function is to express itself despite the illusion that it made. Even within the illusion, it can carry out its function. God's will for me is perfect happiness. What is it? Sometimes, oh God, it's in the 98 through 101 workbook lessons. My part is essential. And that's what it reminds me of. But what about the opposite of that? It said, yet the mind can also see itself divorced from spirit, perceive itself within a body it confuses with itself, and without its function, it has no peace. Does that mean you have no function if you're using the wrong-minded part of your mind?
Don't have the right function.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the wrong-minded sense, your function is as illusory as everything you've made.
And what
Mhm.
came to my mind, it's null and void.
Yeah. Riches, fame, money, predominance, all of those things are not, as Dee said, a function that can mean anything. Why is it the other functions are meaningful? Self, capital S expression is meaningful.
Because it's truth.
Okay. So at least you're getting some real brownie points. At least it's headed in the right direction. And it's not a compounding error. That's how I'm seeing it. Are you?
And it's true happiness and joy and peace.
Yeah.
It has no opposites. You're happy.
And
Yeah.
notice it is not like conditional, like all of the other forms, the illusory forms of happiness.
And hopefully it leads you to a place where you're more right-mindedness than wrong-mindedness.
Okay. And it becomes almost a self-fulfilling prophecy because it opens up a world that looks nothing like the sense world. It looks nothing like, it makes no sense to the logic of the personal ego. It's not dependent upon culture or race or all the things that you've been taught are important. Anyhow, shall we continue? We got just a few minutes. We are at judgment is another example of wrong-mindedness, and we're up
Yep.
to Ron, and then we'll start wrapping up.
Yes. You have often been urged to refrain from judging, not because it is right to be withheld from you. You cannot judge. You merely can believe the ego's judgments, all of which are false. It guides your senses carefully to prove how weak you are, how helpless and afraid, how apprehensive of just punishment, how black with sin, how wretched in your guilt.
Reach some more, Ron.
We should also consider how we think of the ego and our life as perceived from the ego. No one dismisses something he considers part of himself. You react to your ego much as God does to his creation, with love, protection, and charity. The question is not how you respond to the ego, but how you believe you are. Belief is an ego function, and as long as your origin is open to belief, you are regarding it from an ego viewpoint. Belief that there is another way of perceiving is the loftiest idea of which ego thinking is capable. This is because it contains a hint of recognition that the ego is not the self, capital S.
Joe, I'm going to get the chart up one last time and we'll close. The highest, here. I'm reading on 66, 3 lines up. Belief that there is another way of perceiving is the loftiest idea of which ego thinking is capable. So when you made individual consciousness the highest level of perception available to it, is when you start using part B of your ego mind instead of part A. That is right-mindedness. And it didn't come from what you made. It came from what God made and put in you. And if you're in the realm of perception, which you of necessity are, when you split off from truth in your mind or covered it over, the highest perception that you're capable of now, decision maker, is to always pick B and don't pick A. It still doesn't make you a knower, but your purified perception is a stepping stone to awakening. Okay. And now are you seeing the Holy Spirit's role is to work with the separated or split mind? The Holy Spirit does not awaken you. It prepares or purifies, shows you how to purify your perception to its loftiest, which now puts us at heaven's gate for God to take the final step. Joan, you with me?
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Is that okay tonight and everything?
Mhm.
All right,
Thank you. Yeah.
all right. Well,
Right.
next time we'll start on page 67. At least that's where we left off. And thank you for spending time here with me again tonight. I'm learning a lot from this, and I think that it's a book that was needed considering the relationship a lot of course students have with Unity and vice versa. Any final comments? I don't want to keep y'all too long.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Being here. And I will see you again next time. I love you. And for those of us that need the admonition, stay warm, stay safe, okay?
Mhm.
See you
You
soon.
too.
guys.
Thank you.
You
Namaste.
too.
Thank
Thank
you. Have a
you.
blessed week, everybody.
Thank you,
You
Ron.
too.
You too.
Thank you.